Hi everybody and welcome to today's Mediaworks Masterclass. It's a very sunny day actually, so yeah, hopefully there's people enjoying this from a garden or getting an outside view, etc. Today, as I say, this is the third in the installment around SEO that we've been focusing on. The focus is on beyond backlinks, so we're going to talk everything digital PR today. For those that have joined previous sessions, they'll know who I am. But for those that haven't, my name's David Norris and I'm the Group Operations Director here at Mediaworks. I'll be hosting the Masterclass today. I've also got my colleagues with me, so Jack.
Yeah, Jack, so I'm the Organic Search Director here at Mediaworks and co-host this series along with David.
Brilliant, and we've also got Owen joining us today.
Yes, hi everyone, I'm Owen Marshall. I'm a senior consultant on the digital PR team, so help come up with strategies that's ultimately going to end in brands with strong media coverage.
Brilliant. So, as I say, we always like to talk about a giveaway or something that we can do as an action on the back of this. Please do book via that to get your a review of your digital PR profile, your current status, but also we'll put some suggested actions forward to you. So 2 to 5 actionable ideas around how to progress things in all things DPR. Again, feel free to sign up, click the link. We'll also send it out in an email after today's session. So yeah, feel free to get involved with that. So again, final point is really around the SEO Masterclass series. This is the third in the 4-part series that we've got. We've got the next session, which is focusing on the future of search marketing. And I feel like we're going to be talking in that, Jack, about all things AI that seems to have crept into pretty much every session that we've done, which you'd expect in 2025. Feels like you can't do a Masterclass in anything digital marketing without talking AI. But yeah, we've got a session that'll focus on the future of search marketing on the 16th, so we'll send out future materials on that. So I guess, rattle through this quite quickly, is we've got here is the SEO process maturity model, which really focuses on how we break down SEO across Mediaworks. So focusing on initially, we focused on technical. Last time out, we did on-site and content. We're now going to focus today on off-site and an advancement. An advancement will be the one that we focus on the following week. So today we'll be looking at all things outreach as it is and all things digital PR. So I guess for us, it always starts with, we know that Google acts as a business. Google ultimately needs happy users and have a ranking system that rewards helpful, reliable and trustworthy content built for people. External reference points or links, as they were previously referred to and still are referred to in some areas, but we often talk about coverage now rather than just links, form a key part of Google's validation of quality and its reward system via the algorithm. I think it's also worth saying on this is we are very Google centric, but I think what we'll talk about today is we do know that things like ChatGPT, Gemini, various large language models that exist out there are starting to pull in sort of content that isn't just in the Google algorithm. It does actually use other reference points, which again we'll draw upon today. So I guess for us then, the point we'd like to make is then, Jack, I guess, sort of, or Owen, not all links are created equal.
Yeah, so ultimately the kind of objective of digital PR is to drive coverage across those high authority and relevant publications. Now, obviously, as David mentioned previously, we always aim for backlinks in most instances, but as we are seeing kind of the industry shift a little bit, those non-linking placements are becoming a lot more important due to the AI models and also kind of different media outlets also becoming a little bit more strict with where you can and can't get links from and where you can get links pointing to on your website. So ultimately, those links and those pieces of media coverage help search engines prioritize links from trusted and authoritative sources, and that can ultimately, for your brand, improve brand visibility and contribute to wider brand equity in certain situations as well.
Yeah, I always think this is an interesting one, isn't it? Because we can talk, I think we've historically, when we've delivered these types of presentations, if you go back 5-10 years, it was very much a link-centered conversation. Yeah. Whereas I do think it's like, we know that links still play a massive part of what Google's doing and how the algorithm works, but there is sort of more to it than that. And we will cover that as we go through today. So I guess, Jack, there's always the debate, isn't there, about quality of link versus quantity of link in DPR?
Yeah, and I think like everything SEO, it always comes to kind of it does depend. I think on the competitive set that you're working in, the authoritative set you're working in, but also, what the makeup of your site is as well. But I think the main point here is really you need both. You need we always refer to it as like velocity. So you need that velocity of continual coverage, continual being out in the digital landscape, while also, going for those higher authoritative links, ones that we use authority like DA, but actually what I think we mean is more like trustworthy, credible news sources, credible publications. And then lastly, which kind of isn't surfaced too much in this, is like where links are pointing or where we're pointing this coverage to. So I think that really hasn't changed, where if we are looking for the most SEO value possible, we'll be driving links and coverage to specific like transactional, conversional driving pages, whether that's product listing pages, product detail pages, and then obviously then filtering through things like home pages, blog posts, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think that links heavily, doesn't it, with the session that we did on content last week, where we talked about content hierarchy and where it fits, and where you therefore making the decisions around what a search says, the information that's going to be served, and where that actually sits in the person's sort of discovery, if you like, or brand exploration. So I guess something we often talk about is how does digital PR differ from traditional PR?
Yeah, and it's a big debate in the industry, to be honest. I think traditionally, and a little bit more old school, it is much more around kind of public perception and brand reputation. I think the shift to digital has become a little bit more around engagement with those media publications and websites that we are trying to get coverage from. So, in terms of the approach for both of those, digital is a little bit more around creating newsworthy content designed for the online media publications. So as you can see there, that's things like thought leadership and expert tips that we'll get into a little bit more detail on in future slides. Whereas traditionally, it's a little bit more around, product launches, company announcements, and more brand-led news that kind of engages with a lot more stakeholders. Digital, like we've said, it's much more around kind of backlinks and SEO.
Yeah, I would also say that traditional PR is not digital PR if the PR person is just saying, include a link.
Yeah.
That is not what digital PR is. And as you just said, it is about building that story, about working with a journalist sometimes to actually create that news story piece.
I think that's a really important point. Sorry, pause on that though, Jack, around like just that point that you made there, is because I do think we see still quite a lot of that, where traditional PR, it's like, oh well, it got a link, so therefore it's now digital PR.
I've asked for a link, so that's me done. Which I think, again, I'm throwing stones a little bit, but that is not digital PR.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important sort of difference that you need to call out within your business, because they both have a role. What I'd say is it's not one or the other. They both very clearly have a role within an organization and within the sort of wider marketing communication sphere, if you like. But I think it's just worth calling that out around sort of, we are going to focus heavily on digital PR as we go through today, not traditional PR, as you like. So Owen, an example of sort of how we would go about creating that digital PR feed.
Yeah, so as we will move on to, content can come in a kind of wide range of sources, whether or not that's data or kind of thought leadership content, but ultimately the process starts whereby we produce that content, we then kind of pitch the content to target media publications and journalists that we've identified that, give those backlinks or kind of give strong coverage to our clients or your brand. Then from there, the journalists will publish the stories featuring our data or our kind of thought leadership content, and ideally link back to the website. And from that, the search engines will then recognize the backlinks and increase your website authority. As a result, you will then rank higher in the search engines as a result of kind of keyword targeting and making sure that we are targeting the right people with the right type of content. And then ultimately that should then lead to potential customers finding your website easier. And I guess that process, we then go back to stage one and just keep producing that content and ideally get links from a wide range of sources. Again, we will go into a little bit of detail on that, but I think the benefit of digital means that we can produce content that's in line with different industries, whereby we have the publications in mind a little bit. Our audience is always front of mind and it always will be, but also we need kind of a bit more of a diverse backlink profile where we can, so that ultimately decides what content we are creating and therefore pitching.
Yeah, and I think, Jack, we've talked about this before in the sense that linking it back to that ultimate end goal at point 6 on the diagram that you can see on the screen around sort of potential customers find your website easier. We know sort of you need to get your technical right, you need to get your content all set up, but ultimately from a digital PR perspective, that can often be the big difference maker, and can be one of the really key factors in terms of how you rank for certain keywords. And really, we've seen incredible performance in some of the areas that we've literally seen, like campaigns go live, links increase, and then like as soon as the indexations, the traffic's gone up. So again, just linking it back, I often think it's like, because it's in this creative space, it's just so important to just link back to that performance piece to help justify that across the business.
Yeah.
So I guess we want to talk a bit about how then do you define your digital PR strategy. So I guess we talk about a bit of a decision framework here that, again, we'd encourage other people to utilise.
So then really this framework really starts at the research and strategic planning phase. So that is, you were going through the second bit, is the kind of go, no go. Is the site really foundationally sound, as you said there, David, about can we build this DPR into a SEO sound website, which is then get increased visibility? Because if we said, tech isn't there, then quite frankly, you're building with sand. Yeah. It's not going to go anywhere. The next is more around campaign ideation. So it is about developing those kind of newsworthy concepts. Again, we like to throw in a lot around kind of trend research here, audience research, and then, just bring that all together so we have a direction of travel. And then really that content creation then is doing the travel in terms of, okay, what do we do with those trends? How do we get that data? How do we pull data sets together? How do we get opinion pieces? All of that kind of, pushing us in the direction for refining that campaign. And then outreaching, so it's the process of speaking with journalists, outreaching to them, asking for coverage, showing them the story, and actually, hoping that they will then cover and feature the piece. And then lastly is about that metrics reporting. So again, I think we exist in kind of two worlds here for metric reporting. It's more about the traditional PR, which we can say something like Coverage Book gives us, which is like impression figures, readership numbers, that kind of thing. But then more SEO, maybe harder metrics. So things like DAs, trust flows, domain authority, I've said DA already, but that kind of SEO metric versus the actual PR metric, if you like.
Yeah, and I guess just to go into each of these in a bit more detail, Jack, when we talk about research and strategic planning, like, again, this links heavily to when we were talking technical a couple of sessions ago.
Exactly, and it is that whole point, even on the diagram 2 slides ago, is if, we're driving links in, if your content isn't targeting keywords, your site cannot be crawled and indexed, then things will just go nowhere. Yeah. You cannot do DPR in isolation to a site which isn't ready for it, in my opinion anyway. Yeah. Otherwise, again, you are just throwing things out there. And again, there are some benefits in terms of obviously brand awareness and things like that. But from an SEO point of view, you aren't getting you aren't squeezing as hard as you could do. Yeah,
and I think that for us would be the big frustration if we saw that happening, because you've gone to the time, energy and effort of creating, for example, link-worthy content, if you like, and you sat there going, we're then not passing any value through from an SEO perspective. And we know obviously the role that Google plays in most people's search journey. So again, we then move from the technical side of things and the research stage into campaign ideation. So it's a process around that.
Yeah, so that's typically when we look at target audiences and also kind of what competitors are doing. And from there, we'll do a little bit of research to see, are they getting much media coverage from a result of the content that they are outreaching and using for digital PR purposes. And ultimately, ideation is really just around getting in a room and bouncing ideas off one another. I think for me personally, it's one of the more enjoyable parts of the job. I think some people do find it quite challenging because it does require a lot of creativity. But ultimately, what that allows us to do is, like I said, come up with those newsworthy content, concepts and campaign ideas. And really, at ideation stage, we've noted here that there's 4 key areas that we really need to consider. Yeah. So the main one with trying to generate media coverage is that headline value. So will our campaign or will our story actually generate those headlines that we want to see for our brands? You also need to consider search intent, which Jack has just spoke a little bit about there around keyword targeting, and does the campaign align with what people are actually searching for on the SERPs? And then also, as I mentioned previously, each campaign does still need to be authentic to your brand and aligned with your overall messaging and brand. Now, that doesn't mean we can't move into different industries and start kind of targeting different publications to get, new link and root domains and higher domain authority coverage. But also, everything does need to kind of come back to the overall brand and overall message where and when possible, really. And then the final point on there is more around link potential. So is the campaign strong enough for a journalist or for a publication to actually want to link back to your website as a result? Yeah. Are you giving them something that's of value to them warrant the decision to maybe give you that link? Or alternatively, and what we're seeing success with at the moment is hosting some of these campaigns on the website. Yeah. And that allows those conversations to be a little bit easier with journalists to say, right, we want a link pointing back to the overall data study that is sat on your website. And on that page, we will utilize then internal linking to certain product pages and areas of the website that we want to pass that kind of authority through to.
Yeah, I think these are 4 really key points that anybody who's involved in any sort of ideation really needs a good grasp of, and real understanding of these 4 points really helps drive that activity, because it's one thing to come up with a headline that might work, but actually if you sat there going, well, there's no potential link potential and the brand alignment's way off, then there's no point in doing it. So it's almost a bit of a checklist this to utilize, I think. And then when it comes to content creation, there are so many different types of content nowadays that you can actually utilize. I think, again, when people talk about digital PR, they will talk about sort of just that pure outreach of we write an article that may sit on our blog or wherever we outreach it and it generates some links. You sit there and go, there's actually so many other different formats that you can look to engage with.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, again, we'll dive into some of these in a little bit more detail soon, but data in particular, and those data studies and things like that and surveys are the ones at the moment that do seem to be driving a lot of value for journalists. If we can supply, unique data that journalists can't quite get themselves, then we're putting ourselves in a great position to get that coverage and get the links back to the site. At the same time, the typical kind of thought leadership and what we define as always on articles a little bit later on is they'll always kind of hold value in terms of expert tips and getting your brand and your people out there and positioning yourselves as the experts in your field.
Yeah, I think the other one to just call out there for me would be visual assets, because I think that's a really interesting one, because I do think this is an area of growth and an area that people are starting to become, as we become more visual in the way that we engage with content or the way that we consume content. I think, again, we're seeing some really interesting traction in that space with things like, it says there, infographics and videos, etc., and really sort of driving engagement through that type of content where, if you're producing fantastic video-based content, it's yes, there's a way where you can say it's relatively easy. You can shoot video content on your mobile phone, but producing really high quality, useful, really targeted activity is something that the publications are looking for all the time.
I was going to say, and I think as the industry progresses, we're seeing kind of a lot of media publications move to different platforms and make short form content. Yeah. So although the overall aim is still that kind of backlink process, media coverage on things like TikTok and Instagram, where they are using short form content, will absolutely still be of value to brands as well. And I think the infographics as well, the visuals and image side of things is more what we kind of use on site. Now it still comes in handy for outreach purposes, but it still really brings some of these bigger campaigns to life in terms of visually kind of showcasing the story that we're trying to tell.
Cool. So once you've done that, we're then in a phase of outreach and keep this really simple. And I guess sort of we keep it to, if you like, 3 really core areas. I'm not going to go into loads of detail here, but it's worth just calling out these 3, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to begin, that is when the media list starts. So we use platforms like Roxhill that conscious does tend to cost quite a lot of money, so it might not be in all forms of budgets, but there are other ways to kind of spot, journalists that might pick up your content and find their kind of contact details and email addresses. But at the same time, it's more around collating that list across different kind of sectors and industries. So as you can see at the bottom there, there's a very brief example of a media list we created for one of our automotive clients, starting with those tier 1 national press and regional publications, moving down into industry specific, because that relevance is key for links here as well. And then moving into some of the more audience, influence and consumer titles as well.
Yeah.
Once you've got that list, it's then about kind of making sure that your pitch is as concise as possible, so that we're sending the content not just to the right people, but actually showcasing why the content is valuable to those as well. So that is a really important part of the outreach process. And then from there is really just about distributing those pitches, following up with journalists, if we get some bounce backs because journalists are out of office, for example, being quite tactical with when we're going to follow up with those to make sure that that email is going to be, top of their inbox when they return from annual leave, for example. So I find follow-ups being a really important part of this process as well.
Yeah, and it's I guess the process of really achieving that cut through in people's busy schedules, isn't it, as well? And there's a real sort of skill to that. I guess when it comes to then measuring and reporting, Jack.
So yeah, similar to what we were talking about there about traditional versus digital PR, we have these more traditional metrics like pieces of coverage, estimated views and reach, which again we get out of platforms like Coverage Book, and then more SEO-y type metrics, which are things like referring domains, actually how many pieces of coverage we get from links, domain authority, which is obviously a classic metric from Moz. Yeah, and then the keyword growth that we might be seeing in visibility, and actually when we are targeting those links or that coverage into certain pages, into certain campaigns, how we're then seeing that actually in the performance and on the SERP. And then lastly, again, is that kind of new link and root domains. I think Owen covered it there in terms of actually, well, yes, a brand may exist in a vertical, and automotive is a good example, is that yes, we are looking to sell vehicles. And after 2 years of working on DPR as an exercise, you may have all the coverage you need from the industry, and you may have all the coverage you need from tier ones. Well, actually, can we do a release on, again, it's a bit niche, but the new Mario Kart's coming out on Switch. So could we do a fun campaign to do with our automotive brands and actually go after those high authoritative gaming publications, which we would have never ever got in without that campaign? Or similarly like sport, last year we had all the sport on. Again, can we align ourselves with those publications and start acquiring new root domains through that?
Yeah, and it's all about that relevancy piece, isn't it, as well, and making sure we've got that hook and that link that really does incentivize and entice people in. So I think, it's a really good example that you've given there. Mario Kart on Twitch, who'd have thought? So digital PR approaches, I guess in the final stage, we wanted to just really call out some of the different approaches that we've talked about as we've gone through the session today. So I guess foundational link building, keeping this really succinct, Jack.
Yeah, so this is a bit old school, and I think we were even having a conversation before this session about, this does have a place still, but again, it's probably not where we'd spend most of our time, but we would still look at it. So it is things like brand mentions where we literally aren't linked, but are mentioned. Things like broken links, where again, if your site's existed for 10 plus years, some links can be pointed to some random page which might be 404ing. So can we go back to that publication and say, hey, we've got an updated version of that story, which is here. And then again, for some businesses or some brands, directory listings. So things more probably around the locational element. So we're in that, directory of businesses. But other than that, I would say this is, pretty old school, pretty old hat.
Yeah, I think it's everything it says there is foundational.
Yeah.
This is the very sort of core foundations. And then we're into things like reactive digital PR. So Owen, do you want to talk us through that?
Yeah, so as you can see on the kind of couple of screenshots on the right hand side there, we tend to monitor a range of different platforms whereby journalists put out their own kind of requests. So on the right you've got X, whereby typically journalists would use a certain hashtag to put out requests around a whole range of industries. So what we will do is keep a close eye on those and identify any opportunities for our brand to kind of contribute to a story. And then we also have Response Source, which is a really valuable platform, again, where journalists distribute requests with a little bit of a query and some key questions that they almost want an expert to feed into their piece. And that creates a really great opportunity for our brands. And then in terms of how we approach it, each morning, we spend a little bit of time looking at kind of the newspapers and seeing what those headlines are and identifying any key opportunities whereby if a story is breaking, can we get a comment or can we get some data from our clients or from your brand just to make sure that, we are maximizing any opportunities. And then, as I mentioned, tracking journalist requests in real time with those examples on the right-hand side. And then also looking out for trends and utilizing PR calendars. So those can be things like awareness days, which, as we've seen with a lot of the PR calendars out there, there's pretty much an awareness day for anything. So it's actually tying back your content to kind of what is going on, or awareness days, as I mentioned, and that kind of gives journalists that incentive to maybe publish that piece of content at that time.
Yeah, and it's just about being really on top of this, isn't it? And super quick on the trigger, because like it does sort of, a request comes in, and then if you haven't responded, it's like it's gone, you know, and the opportunity's gone. Whereas sort of our always on approach would be very different to that.
Yeah, so this is where, going back to the ideation stage, we typically kind of spend a lot of time discussing always on approaches and that kind of expert content that we've talked about. So as you can see on the left, thought leadership content and always on approaches can really kind of lead to coverage in nationals, regionals and industries. So you can see in the examples there, we've kind of provided a little bit of a split across different industries as well. So we're not just talking about lifestyle content, but also kind of industry and tech, and how that can play a part in kind of building your profile across, you know, target publications for your industry to make sure that your kind of expertise is coming across in pieces.
Yeah, and I think it's about really working with the client in that instance to really understand what do they want to be known for, what areas do they want to contribute to, because I think there's so much opportunity in this space and everything's very different. And it's not to say that once you're on a track, you can't get off the track. It's like it is constantly evolving despite it being sort of always on. So I think this provides a plethora of opportunity really in the digital PR space. I guess an area we've seen like amazing results, I have to say, sort of in recent times is around that sort of data-driven hero digital PR activity.
Yeah, so typically this does take a little bit longer to kind of pull off from that ideation through to execution stage. You know, that we spotted a bit of a trend whereby freedom of information requests were becoming kind of really highly talked about in media publications. So again, there are tools and platforms out there like What Do They Know that can help automate sending out some of these requests. And ultimately what that allows you to do is actually request information on a whole range of topics and in different industries to, you know, public authorities, whether or not that's police forces or kind of healthcare sectors, and get information back that isn't already available. Now, as you can imagine, for journalists, they absolutely love that. So we saw some great success again for one of our automotive clients, whereby there was a lot of talk around kind of the introduction of AI speed cameras on motorways. There were certain forces trialing those out at one point. So what we did is we decided to kind of understand how many drivers were getting fined and how successful that kind of trial was. And that led to some real high profile coverage on the likes of the BBC and the Independent. So that shows cases kind of how valuable those can be. And then moving just quickly on to kind of data-led studies and indexes is more kind of where we use data that is already out there and exists and kind of package those into all one story. And what that allows us to do is create a little bit more of a ranking. So for example, we might look at the top 10 best cities for drivers, for example, and then we can almost pit, you know, certain regions up against one another, and that gives us loads of regional news angles as well. And then just finally on the right hand side there, the kind of use of internal data can't be underestimated as well. You know, brands are sitting on tons of data that could be really valuable to see, you know, did certain products spike in demand as a result of pop culture moments, for example, and those can be really valuable to journalists as well.
Yeah, and I think it's worth calling out, isn't it, that statistic in the top right-hand corner, 277 data-led news stories published every single day in the UK. Like, the media is super hungry for this type of content, which is why it's going down so well. So I guess finally, in the final couple of minutes, I just want to focus on sort of what makes great off-site content.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think, it's one of those where obviously we have 4 things, and a few of them, again, are very SEO-y and kind of bringing it back to that kind of core root cause. So our top one is align with the audience interests and trending topics. So I think, we see our biggest success, as Owen, you said there, when something like an AI speed camera is coming out. It includes AI, cost of living, cost to the consumer, you know, the law. So it really blends in a few different trends and brings that story together. Obviously, then it's optimized for both SEO and the media. So as in, it will have a link back, and we may have a like asset on site, which is then feeding into it. Similarly, I know we talked about in other masterclasses, but the EEAT. So again, we're getting on places, we're getting on publications which are feeding us back authority and trustworthiness. And then last one, again, which really kind of ties in with everything, is that newsworthy headline grabbing piece, which actually is interesting, I think, fundamentally, and relevant for that journalist who is going to write about it or include it under there.
Making it as easy and as sort of stand out as possible for a journalist to engage with, I think is definitely something that's sort of undervalued, because they're busy people. You know, they're always looking for ways to keep it nice and easy. I guess just a smattering of common digital PR challenges that we are seeing right now. So things like securing coverage in a competitive industry, landing backlinks for SEO, building trust with journalists, creating and maintaining media lists, measuring ROI and digital PR efforts. Like, they all are things that are constantly evolving and constantly moving. And I know we'll cover some of this when it comes to AI and the future of search and what that may look like. But again, sort of, these are some of the current common pitfalls that we're coming up against on a regular basis. So again, just worth calling out. But again, we found sort of different approaches and mechanisms for overcoming those, which I think is sort of really important, that none of these are deal breakers. They're just things to be absolutely mindful of as you go through. And I guess that sort of does bring us to the end of that 30-minute masterclass. I hope that people have taken a lot from the session. Please do remember, you can click on the link that's in the chat. We will send out this video via email. It gets posted on YouTube so people can catch up afterwards. But as a follow-up, we haven't had a chance for questions. If any questions have came in, we'll obviously answer those as part of our blogs that we do send out. But as I say, for your free personalized digital PR insight session with the likes of myself, Jack and Owen, then please do sign up via the link in the chat. All I would say finally is thanks very much, Owen. Thanks very much, Jack. And thanks for everybody who's watched and engaged with the session today. I hope everybody enjoys the extended bank holiday here in the UK. Thank you very much, everybody, and see you next time.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.